done to one person is a threat to justice for every person. And that's what is happening today. When you see that 44% of Americans say that they are okay, they would like to see that the civil liberties of Muslims be less than other Americans.
44%.
44%. Almost one in two Americans would like to see that civil liberties be curtailed. 27%, you can say almost 1 in 3, say that Muslim Americans should be required to register their locations with the federal government. 26% think that the mosques should be closely monitored by U.S. law enforcement agencies. 29% said that undercover law enforcement agents should infiltrate Muslim civic and volunteer organization in order to keep tabs on their activities and fundraising. And similar kind of sentiments. All of these should be a cause for concern because all of these are un-American, they're illegal, they're un-American, and this is what the whole struggle has been for 200 years. And to see that some Americans are willing to give up everything that we have progressed as a nation over the last 200 years is very sad.
That's very alarming, especially when you say that that 1/3 had a very negative impression of Islam.
Right.
And but then you also said that those who have been in contact with Muslims have a much better understanding of Islam and has a more favorable view.
Yeah, and that's generally true. If you recall, in our own community here in Jacksonville, every year we do a program at the month of Ramadan called Sharing Ramadan, where we invite our friends and colleagues and neighbors who are not Muslims to come and have to break fast with us. In the month of Ramadan, Muslims fast from dawn to dusk, and at sunset we break our fast with a communal dinner. So we have in the past invited people to come and join us at that dinner. And through that process, we have built many friendships and many good relations. And when you talk to those people who have taken the time and made the effort to come and visit and engage and know, you see a vast difference in attitude.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And the people who come want to come back again and again. And so it's a choice that every person has. They can live within that perception that they have created within their mind, that is shaped by current events, shaped by the actions of some Muslims, shaped by media stereotypes, or they can choose to break out of that fear and say, you know what, I'm going to find out exactly who Muslims are. It is as much as my responsibility as it is the responsibility of the media. Why rely on third-party sources to find out something that is as important and as urgent as this one? Because if we as Americans do not have a proper understanding of Islam and Muslims, we are likely to make repeated mistakes in framing policies, and we are going to make repeated mistakes in the way we engage with the Muslim world. And it's a mistake that we can't afford anymore. I mean, the Iraq War should be enough of a lesson for us that what happens when fear drives policy as opposed to rational thought. After 9/11, there was a climate of fear, and that excessive fear drove policies of us going into Iraq, which was completely a war of choice, not a war of necessity. And we should never fight a war of choice. We should always fight a war of necessity.
No, coming back to the thought that you shared, that as people get to know more about Islam, that element of fear disappears and understanding and respect and friendship and brotherly love develops. I, just like you, have been invited many, many times, and I was invited to speak at a Christian church a few weeks ago, and after my presentation, one member who was sitting there, a young lady, she came to me and she asked me a question which was very alarming to me, and I have reflected a great deal since then. And the question she asked me was, she said she has 2 teenage daughters and they go to high school, and they are 2 Muslim girls in their class. And these girls narrated their experience to their mother, saying that nobody talks to those girls because they wear a headscarf. And their mother asked them, why don't you talk to them? And they replied, no, we don't want to talk to them. Their parents are terrorists. And so she asked them, do you know their parents? Said, no, but all Muslims are terrorists. And she asked my advice, what can I do to advise my daughters that they should not develop this attitude? And I very much respect and admire this lady who asked me that question, that she recognized something happening that is impacting her family, that the general attitude of the classmates in that class is to shun those two ladies because they happen to be of Muslim. And nobody worried about, they have absolutely no contact with anybody who may be committing those horrible acts, but the entire Muslim community gets unnecessarily scarred by that, and I guess that's
exactly what we're talking about,
right.
Is that generalization. And when you look at, and people can do a test with ourselves, and by the way, this test can be done by anybody about another group.
Sure.
So there is something called closed views of a faith and something that is an open view of a faith. And this is not, I'm going to read about this in the context of Islam, but it can be applied by even Muslims if they're trying to evaluate what is their attitude towards people of other faiths.
Sure.
The closed view of Islam is that Islam is monolithic. That Muslims think one way, they respond in one way. The open view of Islam is that Islam is diverse, it is progressive, it has internal differences, and there are vibrant debates within the community on every matter.
Sure.
Number two is that Muslims are different. They separate themselves and they do not have any common values or aspirations with the rest of the society. The open view of Islam is that Islam is interacting. It is interdependent. Muslims have a lot in common, even within their belief systems. Sure. They have a lot in common with Christians and Jews, or for that matter, people of other faiths. Number three, closed view of Islam is that Islam is inferior to the West. It is barbaric, it is irrational, it is primitive, it is sexist, and those kind of attitude. The open view of Islam is that Islam is distinctly different, but not deficient. It's a different faith. Sometimes, if you are confronted with something that you have never seen before, it may appear very strange to you, very weird to you. But if you just pause for a moment and ask the person why they're doing something that you are not accustomed to seeing, there might be a perfectly good reason behind it. It may not be apparent. And if we stay within that closed view, that because it is different, thus it must be barbaric, irrational, or primitive, I think that's where the problem starts happening. So, and that's probably the same problem that you are relating to with these two children, unfortunately, in the school. That they see something wearing a headscarf, and that difference prompts them to view that, oh, this must be something that is primitive, that must be sexist, the woman must be oppressed. Well, if they pause to ask the question, they would find that the girls
probably have a great deal in common.
They have a great deal in common in terms of the aspiration, and not only that, they will also find that the reason these two young ladies choose to wear a headscarf is out of their choice. It's not something that has been forced upon them by their parents. The closed view of Islam is that Islam is the enemy, which is what drives these fears that says, you know what, we need to reduce the civil liberties of Muslims. We need to keep them under surveillance. They need to carry special IDs and things like that. So people see Islam as the enemy, and the closed view is then that Islam is violent, it is aggressive, it is threatening. So it is trying to look at Islam as a clash of civilization. So there's a Western civilization and there's Islamic civilization, and they are on parallel tracks and they have to clash with each other. There's no way they can reconcile with each other. And that's really a tremendous, tremendous oversimplification, as we talked about in a previous program, that Islam and Muslims have been present in the West for centuries. And many of the developments in the West can be attributed to the Muslim presence in the West. So Islam is not an enemy, it is rather a partner. I was once just to give an example of how these partnerships develop into some tremendously enriching activities. I was once in a meeting with the head of Amnesty International, and he was recounting to me the story of how the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was developed. And he recounted me the story that this document could not have been developed with